Hello and greetings. My name is Stephanie Fritz. I'm with the Office of Christian Formation in the Presbyterian Mission Agency. And we are delighted and excited to partner with the Association of Presbyterian Church Educators to offer this webinar for all of you today, Coaching Skills for Moderators and Best Practices for Meetings. In a few moments, the webinar will begin. I'll be introducing the president of APSE, who in turn will introduce our presenter for the day. A few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and it will be available on the APSE website, which is apcenet.org, apcenet.org. You are invited and encouraged to use this webinar for your sessions, your governing bodies, your mid-councils, the organization that you may be a part of. We believe that the skills and the practices for meetings are universal, and we're excited about the content today. So now I would like to introduce Julia Boyce, and she is the current president of APSE.
Hello, and welcome to this webinar on coaching skills for moderators. APSE is thrilled to be a part of helping to host this. We welcome all of you, and first and foremost, the peace of Christ be with you, and also with you. We are delighted to have Yvonne Clemens here to lead this webinar for us. And I will say, if you've ever had to, whether you're an experienced moderator of meetings or new to it, there's going to be something new for each and every one of you to chew on and to practice with and to implement. Vaughn is a retired PCUSA pastor educator who served over 18 years as an associate pastor in adult faith formation ministries at Myers Park Presbyterian Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. His doctoral studies focused on educational technology. He is a past president of the Association of Presbyterian Church Educators. And currently, Vaughn serves as an online instructor and congregational coach for Vibrant Faith Ministries. His interests include helping churches understand and use technology, online course design, and teaching photography, and reading action spy novels. He is married to Marion and his two adult children. They have 2 adult children and 3 grandchildren. Thank you, Vaughn, so much for being with us.
You're very welcome, and thank you for that introduction. I'm delighted to be with you today and share with you some things that I've learned about moderating meetings, and particularly about what it means to approach moderating meetings with coaching in mind. And so I'll be spending the first part of the webinar is going to be in 4 different parts. We'll first look at moderator as coach, and then look at some best practices for meetings, and then we'll look at virtual meetings briefly. And then for those who can stay around, we have a question and answer session for those who would like to stay for a few extra minutes. If you see me fading in and out of the background, it's because I'm using a virtual screen, and for whatever reasons today, it's not as solid as it used to be. So if I look like a ghost, yeah, I'm really here virtually, of course. I do want to express my indebtedness to this book. It's called Coach Approach Ministries, which is the organization, and it's called A Beginner's Guide to Christian Coaching: How to Have Powerful Conversations That Really Make a Difference. It is available on the website of Coach Approach Ministries, and there's a bibliography at the end of this webinar which will have that information how to get there. But if you just look up Coach Approach Ministries, you'll find a place where you can get this. It's only 18 pages long, but it's an excellent summary of the coaching mentality, the coaching approach, and the skills you need as a coach. And I will be sharing some of that with you and trying to apply it to moderating and leading meetings. So why coaching? I need to tell you a little history first. As we as a society moved out of the industrial era into a service or digital era, we kept those certain ways of approaching problems. Even as the world became more and more complex and interconnected, if something needed fixing, we would find an expert and ask them to help. What has solved these technical challenges for generations was expertise. But some of our modern problems and challenges do not allow for easy solutions. Some of our challenges are so new and so different that they are unlike any we have faced before. The late Dr. Edwin Friedman, who popularized family systems theory, often talked about the failure of expertise, how our dependence on specialized expertise to solve our challenges has impoverished our ability to cope and to adapt to unfamiliar challenges. No one, he says, can have all the expertise needed to address every challenge we face in our modern world. So a new way of thinking, a new way of approaching our challenges is required. You know you are facing an adaptive challenge when none of your standard solutions are making an impact. That's where transformation is sacrificed on the altar of the status quo. Adaptive challenges cannot be solved by applying technical solutions. They require a different way of thinking. And when we're dealing with our relationships with people that we're working with on our teams, and even with individuals, coaching is such a new way of thinking. Our previous approaches to leadership in meetings and with committees and teams, we used an industrial approach to personal and professional formation. We often assume that one size fits all, that the same techniques will work in all situations in all places. But it required people to adapt to the approach. They were often impersonal and generic. But the wisdom of the ages teaches us that people really do not do what you tell them to do, or often don't do what you tell them to do, because there's something inside of each of us that values our own ideas and solutions more than we value the ideas pushed on us by others. The one-size-fits-all mentality ignores the uniqueness of God's creation within each one of us. Buy-in is much harder to achieve than ownership. For one person to buy in, another has to be selling. We have ownership of that which we create. And low ownership leads to low accountability. How many times have you finished a meeting and gone away and realized that the meeting really didn't change much? That maybe the leaders had some great ideas or some key people, but they hadn't filtered down to the people who really need to be involved in doing the work and making things happen. Well, if this is true, it suggests that we need to find an approach that is not about training or telling or teaching, but is more about discovering, drawing out, and asking. The coaching approach is such a way. It allows us to help others move forward to the places they want or need to go in the way that will be most effective for the individual and for the team. It is personal customization at its very best. Coaching works because every person has it in them to know where they want to go and what it will take for them to get there. People don't wash their rental cars. Now, if that doesn't make sense right now, I'm going to explain that in a minute, but that's a real handy little metaphor. People don't wash their rental cars. Well, when we draw out what is inside others, rather than try to get them to buy what we have in ourselves, we open the door to more effective solutions. Coaches believe in others, their abilities, their creativity, and their motivation. Coaches believe that we are each the experts in our own life, that inside of each of us live the solutions to knowing where we want to go and the very best way for us to get there. That every person brings energy, intelligence, imagination, and love. And for us Presbyterians, we hear that frequently enough. We ought to have that embedded in our hearts. Every person is unique. God-given gifts that we can use to build up the body of Christ in this world. Now back to the rental cars. Let me ask you this. Well, when was the last time you washed your rental car before you turned it in? We are much more likely to take care of our own stuff than we are others' stuff. That includes physical things, that includes ideas. So if you've ever washed your rental car before you turn it in, you're probably in a very small minority, because we take care of our own cars, even though the rental car may be newer and have more bells and whistles and may be more fun to drive, but our own cars have more value to us because they are ours. So coaches understand that people don't do what they are told to do, they do what they tell themselves to do. They don't do what they're told to do, they do what they tell themselves to do. So coaches help people to tell themselves what to do in a more focused, intentional way. Coaches understand the possibility for how people move forward toward their goals are endless, bound only by the other person's creativity, motivation, and uniqueness. When we tell people what to do, we are limited by our own understanding of the issue. And that requires us to be experts on the subject at hand and an expert on the other person. People function best when they are not dependent on the expertise of somebody else, and when we're not trying to impose our expertise on others. So there is such a thing as the coaching mindset. In addition to the coaching mindset, there's a skill set, and we'll come back to that shortly. But the mindset is how you think, while the skill set is what you do. There is a great temptation that we face. It is always to adopt new skills without changing the way you think. We're anxious to learn new techniques to find technical solutions for our problems, for quick fixes, and we always think if we have enough new skills, it'll transform the way we work. Most of us find that just doesn't work that way. So if we are stuck in our old ways of thinking, we'll always get the same old results. So to change the way things are going, we have to change the way we think or approach the issues we face. In a coaching mindset, there are 6 shifts in belief or thinking that need to take place for the coach to approach what they do with a coaching mindset or with a coaching paradigm in mind. First, the coach moves from, I understand things better than the other person does, to, I have some information and the other person has other information. Secondly, we shift from, my goal is to get other people to think the way I think, which is often the way that we operate in running communities and everything, trying to get other people to see things the way that we see it. And in a coaching mindset, we move from that framework to understanding and helping the other person clarify what it is that they think. The third shift is from conversations must end with all or nothing, meaning that every choice, every decision has to be complete and an intact piece all in itself. The coaching mindset moves from thinking in that way to understanding that change is a contextual process that unfolds over an indefinite amount of time. That it's very rare we actually come to a place where a definitive answer or response to a complex problem is evident. Sometimes we have to work around it before we can actually see it. The next shift is from the way of thinking that says, to be helpful, I must maintain control or else disengage the conversation. It is not the role of the moderator to control everything about the discussion. It is the role of the moderator to be helpful, and I must engage without being in control. One of the hardest things for people in leadership roles to do, many of us have longed to be in leadership roles at some point in time, and once we get there, we want to exercise our ability to lead people, and sometimes it is hard to let go of our need to be in control. We also shift from thinking, I must maintain a mindset of evaluation and serve as a critic to what the other person says. So if we're leading or moderating a meeting, we might want to show other people where their ideas fall short of the perfect answer or the perfect solution. Instead, the coach thinks about maintaining a mindset of curiosity and openness to what the other person says, because sometimes new things come out of conversations that you never expect. So being open and curious is the way to go. The last shift is that thinking that people change when they get the right information. This ties back into the failure of expertise mentioned earlier, but we think that our problems can be solved only if we have the right information, the right tactics, the right techniques. And the coaching mindset says that people grow when they recognize truth more clearly and are motivated in themselves to change. So 6 basic shifts in thinking. Let me show you with a diagram here and see if it might make more sense. In our traditional approach to leading or moderating groups, the leader works with the person or the team in order to get them to see the leader's point of view and to move toward the goal that the leader sees is necessary for the team. But in a coaching approach, the coach stands beside the people, the person or the team, and recognizes in them all the valuable skills and abilities to move toward the goal that they set for themselves, and encourages them to own their goal, their process, and their options that are available to them as a way of solving whatever problem is presented for the teams to work on. So the difference is that in our traditional approach, the leader is doing an awful lot of the work, trying to get the team to align with them. And in the coaching approach, the coach encourages, cajoles, questions, and helps the team use the resources that are inherent in themselves to reach the goal they set for themselves. So coaching does require a change in mindset. It's not easy or intuitive, but with determined effort and practice, it can become natural. The goal, it seems to me, is to stop over-functioning as a moderator, as a leader. Instead of taking on most or all of the responsibility for setting goals and getting things done, and who of us who having led a meeting or led a team hasn't ended up doing a lot of the work in between just to make sure things get done? Or maybe that's just me. Instead of approaching things and assuming all that responsibility, a coach will focus on raising the capacity of each person on the team, raising their capacity to set their own goals, to understand the reality of their situation, to explore their options, and to decide on a way forward together. So in addition to the coaching mindset, there's also a coaching skill set. With a coaching skill set, there are 3 primary skills that you need to focus on and develop in order to have all that you need to guide people well into the process of determining their own goals and moving toward them. The first skill set for coaching is one that we're very familiar with. For the most part, we've learned this in our school, our seminary, and our educational training, and that's the skill of listening. And this does include what we've known as active listening, be able to hear inside the words of other people, to sense their nonverbal communications, to hear what's not being said, and to be able to share that so that you can check out whether you're actually on track with what they're trying to say. But the coach's listening moves beyond that. It's a listening in order to know the best next question to help the person or team keep moving forward, to determine what is important to the person and the team right now. One experienced coach, and I've heard this in a couple different places, recommends that every leader should take a dumb pill. A dumb pill, meaning you start your conversations with no prior expectations of what the answer is going to be, but instead you seek to explore the world as the person or team perceives it, and with curiosity and with excitement, find what possible resources they have to apply to the challenge in front of them. The second skill in the coach's skill set is that of questioning. Over and over again, when you do this, you will discover that great questions clarify and motivate people. You can see the aha, the light bulb that turns on inside their head when things click together as a result of some question that you've offered to move the process forward. We ask questions in order to do several things. We ask questions in order to encourage people to continue thinking, exploring, and going deeper in their thoughts. We ask questions to invite the person or team to think through the situation in a way that they haven't previously considered. And we ask questions to create new awareness of both current realities and new possibilities. A great question is worth a lot more than a lengthy discussion. The best questions are planned and thoughtful. It means you may need to think about them ahead of time and anticipate what's going on so that you can ask a great question in the midst of that discussion. The best questions are open-ended rather than closed. Open-ended questions keep a person thinking and exploring. Most of us like closed questions, don't we? That was a closed question, excuse me. An open question would be, how beneficial have you found questions that are open rather than closed? It takes practice taking a closed question and turning it into an open question. But if in the course of your meetings you keep track of some of the questions you ask and look at them later when you have a little bit of space to think about them, you will find that coming up with open questions is a practice that you can develop and turn it into a good skill. For example, you might be tempted to say, should we increase this budget item? Where an open question would be, what are some of the ways we could adjust our budget? In the one case, the answer is a yes or a no. In the other, it's open to an exploration of all the different options that are available to adjust the budget. The best questions are simple and concise rather than complicated or compound. Now, this is a challenge for me. Some of us, I like to string several questions together. I think it's because I haven't thought about them in advance and I'm clarifying my question as I speak it, stringing multiple thoughts into what I hope is a coherent question. What I usually see is a rather bemused look on people's faces or glassy eyes that lets them know they have no clue what I'm trying to say or ask. But the secret to simple question is to think them out before you speak them. If you can do it in a pause, think of how can I frame this question in an open-ended way, that's great. But I often find myself getting caught up in the pattern or process of the meeting and can't think that quickly. And so sometimes I write out my questions in advance, especially if it's regarding something that's very consequential and has strong emotions and strong convictions and values surrounding it. A well thought out question can help people focus their thinking and explore the issue in ways that they had not considered. The last practice for best questions is to ask questions out of curiosity rather than a place of judgment. If you start your question with, don't you think, immediately that is a question that presumes the answer is first of all, yes or no. It's not an open-ended question, but it also presumes that you're trying to see if people agree with you. And if they don't, then there's a sense in which sometimes people perceive that as judgmental, that no one else has the right answers except for us as we moderate and lead. But a curious question will help you understand better the person, the people, and the issues that you are working with. So we have a coaching mindset and a coaching skill set. The way those blend together is through the coach's role in guiding the process. It is often helpful for the coach to work from some particular model that helps the coach keep on track and keep moving. One such model that I like a lot and is used in the coaching world, it goes by the acronym GROW, which conveniently stands for one of the things that we in the Christian community want people to do is grow in their faith and their maturity as disciples. But GROW stands for a set of words and concepts. G stands for clarifying goals, objectives, and desired destinations. The R is reality, understanding the current reality, which is often the gap between where one is and where one wants to go. The O are the options and opportunities that we explore and identify, bunches of them, as we move forward. And the W is decide on and commit to the way forward, the due dates, and how we're going to be held accountable for what we say we're going to do. So this is a model that is a process for how you would approach a meeting or an individual agenda item. It's a framework that can work in all kinds of situations, not just in moderating and leadership in the church, but it can work with personal conversations if someone asks you to help them process or think about something. So you start with clarifying the goals, sometimes called objectives, or think about the destination, where people want to end up when this is all over. Then help them to take a look at the reality. What is it really like? What is the gap between where we are now and where you want to go? And what are some of the obstacles maybe, or the challenges that exist in your getting from where you are to where you want to be? And then you explore and identify all the options and opportunities that exist in that space. And this is the brainstorming space. This is the creative and imagination space where you try to think of things that you may never have thought of before in order to see your problem in a different way and to come up with a creative solution that may point you in the right direction. And then finally, once you spent time in pulling all that together, then that's where you make a decision about what you're going to do. So the question would be, in the midst of all these options, which one would be your next step right now? What do you want to do next? Which one of these looks most beneficial to your process in moving forward? And along with that often goes questions about, okay, now that you've decided how you want to get there, how do you want to be held accountable for that? Is there someone else that can help you reach that goal in the way you said you want to do it? And can they help you? Do they have resources you need? And when is it going to happen by? Because most of us know that if we set tasks without due dates, they often just keep adding to the length of our to-do list. So this is a process that can be used as a framework for an entire meeting or for an individual agenda item, but the acronym GROW, goals, reality, options, and the way forward, is a great way, a framework to use to think about how do you move through the meeting process. So a quick summary of our coaching as a moderator. Key points were that the coach approach helps us to move others toward the places they want and need to go in the way that will be most effective for the individual and for the team. It shifts our focus from how we get people to do what we want to what they want. It requires that we practice and demonstrate the skills of listening, questioning, and guiding the process. And the acronym GROW reminds us of the goals, reality, options, and the way forward. So a moderator as coach uses a coaching mindset and coaching skills in order to do their work of leading a group or a team. Bringing a coaching mindset and skill set to their work as a leader. Focusing on helping team members have the clarity, purpose, and resources to do the work that they agreed to do. Helps team members continually move through the grow cycle, finding clarity about goals, finding awareness of the reality, exploring creative options and deciding on the way forward. So that's the end of the section here. I was going to give us a quick break, but I think we're in good shape on time, and I'm just going to keep rolling. And those of you who are watching this later, this would be a good time to take a stand-up break if you need to do that. But for those of us who are with me today, I'm just going to keep rolling. Next, I want to look at some best practices for meetings. And I'm very much aware that what we're talking about here applies both to face-to-face meetings and virtual meetings. There are some differences, and we'll talk a little bit about that toward the end, but most of these practices are things that apply whether you're working with online meetings, as most of us are these days, or whether you're dealing with face-to-face meetings. I asked some people to provide some input on what they had experienced as the worst meetings of their work in the church, and here's what they came up with. While you look and try to see some of those words, I'll read the responses to you. Some of the worst meetings were long meetings, really long meetings. Meetings where the moderator verbally processed everything, where micromanagement of others in front of colleagues, a verbal listing of 1,000 tasks by everyone, open discussions, and by that I presume they mean that went on without much guidance. People not muting when they're online. People straying way off the agenda and the moderator not bringing them back. Attempting to deal with multi-level issues right then and there. Participant presenters who haven't prepared ahead of time. People who hog the speaking time and aren't reined in. Moderators who don't know when to shut up. Moderators who don't know how to moderate a conversation. Moderators are so afraid to insert anything into the conversation that they provide no leadership or possible direction, even when it's sorely needed. Meeting for the sake of meeting and covering the covering the exact same subjects, meeting after meeting with no forward motion. Now, I'm sure those are foreign to some of you, but I have to say that I've been in meetings where those were absolutely true, and some of them I've led and been the cause of some of that. But I'm trying to use a different way now to take me to what I would call better meetings. We asked the same question: what did people identify as the best meetings that they had attended? And on the screen there, you see a picture of a meeting of the APSI Organization Leadership Council several years ago, as they were sorting through some things. We had some great meetings. And as we thought about what made for best meetings, here's what we came up with. First of all, you can take all the things that were the worst meetings ever and just reverse them, make them the opposite, and those would become the best meetings ever. Where everyone stays on task and on time. There are respectful interchanges. There's agreement about future actions and how to proceed. Using me, who's a good moderator, this is someone else who said that, using me because I'm a good moderator. And the awareness that moderators should do some talking. And meetings are really great when you can name X number of things accomplished and have a clear list of responsibilities assigned between meetings. Those are some of the things that people identified as the best meetings ever. I'm going to suggest to you that there are 3 basic keys to a great meeting. And if you just get out of this meeting a couple things, I hope this is one of them you get. Great moderators will use these 3 things. And if you don't learn anything else, you'll be a better leader if you get these 3 things done. The first is to set the agenda. Everyone should know why they're gathered and what they're supposed to be accomplishing. The agenda provides a compass for the conversation and the discussion, so the meeting can get back on track if the discussion wanders off course. The second thing would be to start on time and end on time. I've often come to use the phrase that when we're ready to start the meeting, that we don't want to reward the late comers. I've been in meetings where people would wait for 5, 10, even 15 minutes until other people come. And I'm of the opinion that if people can't adjust or be disciplined about their own schedule to get where they're supposed to be, we shouldn't accommodate their lack of planning or their lack of discipline. So I try to get started. That's even better, because if we reward meetings, we can share parts that people may have missed with them at a later time. But I try to get started on time and then end on time. A definite end time will help ensure that you accomplish what's on your agenda. You've heard the aphorism that work expands to fill the time available. Well, meetings expand far beyond the time available, to the point where often what happens is you get to the end of the meeting and realize there are 3 crucial things that you wish you'd had a chance to talk about, but you're out of time. So having a definite end time will help make sure that you do things with discipline, and making sure that you prioritize your agenda items is another. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. The third thing is to end with an action plan. Before the end of every meeting, the discussion should include deciding who is responsible for what and what the deadlines are. Otherwise, all the time you spend in that meeting and all the discussion you've done will be for naught. Mark Toro, who is a managing partner of North American Properties in Atlanta, a real estate operating company, uses a phrase in his business to end meetings that's become an acronym in his business and helpful to many others. His acronym is WWD WBW. It's not quite as crisp as what would Jesus do, WWJD. But this is who will do what by when, which is the basic question that you ask to make sure that people know what their responsibilities are and when they're supposed to have it done, so that things actually move forward between meetings. So again, have an agenda, start and end on time, and at the end, make sure you have your action plan recorded. If you do these 3 things, your team will rise up and call you blessed. Now I want to take a more detailed look at all these different parts, and I'm going to suggest that a typical meeting actually has 5 parts that we need to attend to as the moderator or the leader of the meeting. The meeting flow involves pre-meeting preparation, how we start the beginning of the meeting, what we do during the meeting, how we conclude or end the meeting, and how we process things after the meeting has concluded. We'll take a look at each one of those in turn. So preparing for the meeting is often a more solitary thing that the moderator does on his or her own, but sometimes it can be done with another member of your executive team or your leadership team, where if you're like me, you need to bounce some ideas off people before you know what you're thinking. So it's helpful sometimes to have somebody else talk things through with you. So before you gather, there are several things that need to happen. You need to prepare the agenda, and we've talked about how important that is with the last slides. But to prepare the agenda, you should review your previous minutes. You should note in those minutes the actions that were delegated to people and just to follow up. And sometimes when I review the minutes like that, I wonder if they've finished that. And so I'll drop a quick note or a text message or something to the people who was responsible for it, just to check so that we're not surprised in the meeting by a check-in like that. Then I would strongly recommend that you think about the priority for your agenda items. And that includes estimating the time required, but also the importance for what you're trying to do. I often start with an agenda that's just I dump a list of things that I know that need to be done. And if I start with that list that hasn't been organized or prioritized, we often end up doing inconsequential things and spending a lot of time on those and getting to the end of the meeting and not having time for the really important things. So front load your agenda with the things that are crucial, the things that require a lot of energy or time or discussion that finds out what resources are needed to keep moving forward. So if you prioritize your agenda items and estimate the time required, you're not going to have an agenda that has 15 items and you can only deal with 3. So another thing to help you make sure that you're getting done what you need to get done is to state or frame the anticipated outcome for each of the items. It may be as simple as saying, we'll assign this task to so-and-so, or that we will have 3 options for how to proceed with the budget discussion. Or perhaps we'll spend some time at our next meeting after we've read some articles and talking about this issue further. But knowing where you want to end up with an agenda item often helps you not only frame the time that's required, but also make sure you don't get caught running down rabbit holes that have little or no value. So once you've prepared the agenda, distribute it and get feedback on it. There's different ways, people have different sense of when the agenda needs to go out. Some say, a couple days before the meeting, some say a week before the meeting. I find that if you get the agenda out earlier, it gives people a chance to read and to look at it and to think about what's coming up, especially if with the agenda, the minutes are sent that have the assignment of the task and who's supposed to do it and when. I have to say that there have been many times I've read the minutes right before the meeting and realized I was supposed to have done something and it dropped through the cracks. So distributing the minutes, which will help you keep people on task. You also want to gather all your documents and be ready. It's painful when you realize you needed some document and it's not at your fingertips and it takes 5 minutes to find it on your computer or in a file somewhere. So prepare in advance and the meeting will go so much smoother. Okay, once you've done the pre-preparation, then you begin your meeting, and again, or you're going to hear me say this again and again, start the meeting on time. And then I'm going to suggest a practice that is both a meeting practice and even a spiritual practice. And I was introduced to this by Ann Wilson, who was a former president of the APSI organization, who used gathering questions that were designed for people to tell their stories and to get to know each other's stories. And they became a powerful way of building community and enduring connections across the months and years that we worked together as a team. Gathering questions can be something as simple as introducing yourself and something about your family or your children or grandchildren or places that you've always wanted to go. It could be your personal views on things. It can be personal experiences that you've had. Everything from what's the farthest you've traveled from your home to when was the time when you really struggled with a particular challenge and then finally were able to overcome it. The traditional highs and lows, the concerns that encourage other people to be aware of the struggles that we have in our lives, and an implicit invitation, maybe explicit invitation for others to pray for us and on our behalf. There are many more ways to do this, but people usually complain about this, that it takes so much time at the beginning. And with a group of 12 or 15, it could be 15 or 30 minutes. With a group of 5 or 6, it could be maybe 15 minutes. But if you do this, you will discover that the time that's invested there is an investment in the health and well-being of the community that bears benefits down the road that you may not have imagined. Developing a community of faithful people laboring over the work of the church is a joyous thing to do and to be a part of when it's done in the context of we're all in this together and God is a part of this gathering and our work together. To make that a little bit more explicit, usually a devotional period, which could be scripture or prayer. It could be sharing a story or an image or a meditation that you've picked up somewhere along the way. I've become a fan of the Vibrant Faith visual faith cards. If you've not seen those, they're like half size sheets of 8.5 by 5.5 images. They're very evocative, and use those as a way of asking people to pick one out of a group of them to say which one represents where you are in your life right now, or what represents a struggle that you're engaged in, or a hope that you might have. And those images are a wonderful way of getting to where people are and having them share some of their own personal stories. So here's a picture of the APSI Leadership Council in a virtual meeting. We transitioned to this a number of years ago. Many of us are doing this right now and finding that all of our meetings are happening online through Zoom or Skype or some other platform on the internet. But we found that even meeting virtually, that we ended up developing pretty strong relationships over the course of our 2 or 3 years of meeting together that were in some ways surprising, because we've been told, at least I've been told for many years, that virtual communities are not the same as real communities. And I want to say to you that physical presence is not required for real presence and real relationships to occur. So after we begin the meeting, during the meeting, these are just some quick things I'll just share. You should have a clerk or someone, a secretary, for taking the minutes, and it should not be the moderator. It's very difficult for the leader or moderator to do that task and also to record what happens in the minutes. If I've got stuck in a situation like that, I know the meeting is recorded. It takes as much time as the meeting took in the first place, but you can go back and review the recording and take minutes, or have someone take minutes from that. During the meeting, just quickly review your agenda items, make sure there aren't any changes that need to be made, and clarify whether an agenda item is for information, discussion, or decision. I found when you can group things by those categories, just FYI, or we need to talk about this, or we need a decision on these, it's a lot easier to move those decision issues up to the front of the agenda and make sure they get taken care of before you get caught up in some of the others. So probably the decision would come first, discussion as necessary to create the decision, or maybe general discussion for future issues, and then maybe information at the very last. You also want to do your typical reviewing and correcting previous minutes. And then one of the techniques that's used by a lot of meeting leaders is something called a parking lot. Now, parking lot is a place where you store off-topic issues for future considerations or agenda items for the next meeting. If your team, if your people know that you or the secretary or someone is keeping track of the items that need to be discussed and they're not going to be forgotten, then they're more willing to let them go in that meeting time to say, okay, we'll schedule this for our next time together, or for the next month after that if there's something critical going on soon. So put things on the parking lot or on a holding list, and it's helpful to have those things publicly available so people know that their ideas are not going to be forgotten. Meetings can be small, they can be big, but these principles apply to meetings of all sizes. So during the meeting, one of the crucial things is making sure that everyone has a voice in the meeting. Now, that's a little bit harder to do with virtual meetings, although it can be done with some intentional and with a technique that I'm going to share with you now. Most of you may know of the mutual invitation model that was developed by Dr. Eric Law out of a multicultural context to ensure that every voice is heard. In some cultures, people by by upbringing and by predisposition, are not going to speak up. Introverts are like that, and us extroverts can often just overwhelm people with our words. And it's important to make sure that everyone, no matter what the circumstances, can have their voice heard. So this process of mutual invitation is a really great way to do that. The mutual invitation, you invite someone to speak or to respond to it. They have the floor. Nobody can discuss or ask questions. There's some exceptions to that, but generally you allow the person to speak, and when they're finished, they choose another person from the group to be the next person to speak, and that goes all the way around until everyone has a chance to talk. And that ensures that everyone has the floor, everyone has the microphone, and everyone has their voice heard in that setting. Also suggest you look for what one of my coaches has called sprinter tasks. These are short, clearly defined, doable things that can be completed by the next meeting. Sometimes, especially when we're dealing with complicated processes and very complex plans, you don't know where to start. But if you can spend a few minutes in the process of meeting, think about, well, what is the next thing that needs to be done and who can do that? And create a list of sprinter tasks, then you will have a sense very quickly that you're moving forward with your plans toward whatever goals you've set. And then prior to moving to the next item, and this is particularly for moderators and leaders, we tend to want to get through the agenda, but it's helpful when we finished a grouping to make sure that you summarize the actions taken using the WWD-WBW, which means what will be done, who will do it, by when, and where's the accountability lie for that. So just is kind of wrapping up it's helpful to do each decision. If you want to do it at the end of the meeting, make sure you go back and collect all those so that you can report them out. So tracking those assignments is crucial for keeping your work moving forward. The minutes should always record each assigned task to those WWD, WBW items. And some folks have found helpful to use a chart or a spreadsheet to keep track of these. And if you've got an excellent clerk or a secretary, they can do this in the meeting, or they can have an online document that is shared with everybody, that all this can be documented, and people can go back and check. Now, I was supposed to do something, what was it? They can go back and find out what that is. Here are some samples of a couple different ways. Let's see if I can get my pointer up here going. Yeah, there we go. Okay, yay. The top is the sprinter tasks I mentioned to you before, where these are things that can be done just with in the next 30 plus days before you meet the next time, a place to write down what it is, who's responsible, who's the point person for that, and then any deadlines or comments about that task. Another way to do it, and this is done in a spreadsheet, a Google Docs spreadsheet that's stored on a Google Docs folder for the team, so that everybody has access to it, and they can go back real quickly and check on what it is that they're responsible for doing. This is just a Word document, and you can include this kind of thing in your meeting minutes. And if you have a secretary or clerk that does this at the end of the meetings, everyone will call them blessed, because this is a quick summary without having to read through all the minutes of what you're responsible for, because I always look for my name first in terms of these lists to make sure I know what I'm doing and what's happening. So doing these in real time is great. If you have them in the minutes and then they're posted quickly, that's even better. Okay, I want to mention a couple collaboration platforms, since some people have found these to be helpful in order to store your minutes, to store agendas and task lists and all those kinds of things. Some of you may know about these, but I'm just going to mention them. We don't have time to go into all these, but some that are being used with great effect by organizations that I'm connected with are Slack, Basecamp, Mighty Networks, which is a free Facebook-like platform for teams and groups. folks use Google Docs, Dropbox, OneDrive, all the different platforms that are available for cloud storage by the various providers in the internet world of cloud computing. So those platforms are very helpful to keep folks connected in between meetings. But at the end of every meeting, be sure you leave some time to wrap things up before you leave. And I'm going to encourage you to be disciplined, or else you'll run out of time to finish your... Okay, I must have run out of time on that one. And that's what happens. You get to the end of the meeting, people have to go, they start leaving 5 minutes early, and you've got important decisions that need to be made. So you have to be disciplined, you have to anticipate your agenda, and make sure you're dealing with important things first. Have the clerk or moderator verbally review or confirm the actions taken and who's responsible, all those wonderful who, what, who's doing what, when, and by when. Who's doing what? I got the initials wrong, didn't I? Who's doing what, by when? You know what I'm talking about. I'm completely confused right now. Okay. You should also confirm the date and time of the next meeting so that everybody's on board with that. Hopefully you will set your meeting schedule in advance and people know several months ahead of time, but trying to organize a meeting when it's not been set in advance is one of the most torturous tasks, I think, of our modern day. And also you want to have some sort of a formal closing to the meeting. So whether it's a devotion or a prayer, it's often nice to ask somebody in the meeting other than the moderator to close that out. So these things are not unfamiliar to you, but there's still some things left to do after the meeting. You want to review your notes, what went well and what didn't, so you can learn for the next time. And encourage a quick turnaround on the minutes, because if the minutes are the place where all the task assignments are documented, people need to see that sooner than later. Then distribute the minutes, remind teams of agreed upon action items, note the next meeting date and time, and any needed preparation needed for the next meeting. Let me just say a quick word about virtual meetings, and then we'll be wrapping up. The same coaching mindset and skills are needed for virtual meetings as for physical face-to-face meetings. But technology can introduce barriers and frustrations. The host or the moderator or co-host needs to have skill with a virtual platform. And I recommend with larger groups of 10 or more that you need a second person to help you do this. That it's hard for one person to read the chats or the questions that are asked, to respond to people's questions, and to manage the flow of the meeting and to make sure everything is on track and on time. So practice good virtual meeting discipline. And by that I mean attend to your lighting and avoid strong backlighting to where you're in the dark and everybody sees a beautiful background. So that requires sometimes turning your computer around or turning on extra lights, or even setting up a light in front of you that can shine in your face to light up your face. You can see, that's what I've done here. I've got a lighting system that actually allows me to provide a little bit extra light as needed. But if I didn't have that, I'd be completely dark and you wouldn't be able to see what I look like. Not that that's important, but it's like having a silent person in the meeting that's trying to hide. Make sure you mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And for those of you who use Zoom, I want to make sure you know about a little trick. And if it's not already set, you have to go into the settings in the Zoom client. Under audio, there's a checkbox where you can check, press and hold space to temporarily unmute yourself. So I can't tell you how many times people have, when they realize they're muted, they have to look and remember how to put the cursor where they need to unmute themselves. But if that setting is checked in the Zoom client, then all you have to do is press the space bar. It's like a press to talk button that allows you to talk until you release it, and then you go back on mute. It's a wonderful, handy, very convenient way to allow yourself to speak when needed, but then not when it's not. Let's see, I want to go ahead and finish up here since we're getting close to our time. So a coach approach allows us to help others move toward places that they want to or need to go in the way that'll be most effective for the individual or the team. We shift our focus from how to get people to do what we want to help them do what they want. We practice the skills of listening, questioning, and guiding the process. And we keep our GROW model in mind, the goals, the realities, the options, and the way forward. We think about the meeting essentials, the agenda, the starting and ending on time, the action plan, and we work on the meeting details in the 5 movements of the meeting. We use the same coaching mindset and skills in virtual meetings that we use for physical meetings, but we need to learn the technology well enough that it becomes transparent. And we need to anticipate the ways technology can be an obstacle in our online meetings and be prepared to deal with that in helpful ways. Well, I've covered a tremendous amount of ground in this short time, and I hope it'll be helpful to you in your work. I do have a bibliography of resources at the end of this PowerPoint presentation, or I can make that available separately. We'll check with Stephanie in terms of how she's going to make this available. I know the webinar is going to be posted on the APSE website, and I'm available. If you don't have an email address, you can contact Stephanie and she can put you in touch with me. I'm happy to provide any additional assistance that might be helpful to you.